Bam Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajakacharya Astar Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Go Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Dwarka Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Srimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Gaura Premananda, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 13, The Appearance of Lord Varaha, Text 42. Samstapayanam Jagatam Sa Tashtusham Lokaya Patnim Asi Mataram Pita Videma Chasyai Namasa Saha Tvaya Yasyam Sva Tejognim Ivaranavada Samstapayanam Jagatam Satashtusham Lokaya Patni Masimataram Pita Videma Trasyai Namasa Sahatvaya Yasyam Swate Jogni Vivaranavada Samstapayanam Jagatam Satashtusam Lokaya Patnim Asimataram Pita Videma Chastyai Namasa Sahatraya Yasyam Swache Jogni Mivaranavadaha Samstapayenam jagatam satashtusam Lokaya patnim asimataram pita Videma chasyai namasa sahatvaya Yasam swatejogni mivarana vadaha Samstapayenam jagatam satastusam Jagatim Kandaram Jagatam Videma Chasyai Namasa Sahatvaya Tejo Nivara Vada Vaishnavis. Samstapaya enam. Raise this earth. Jagatam, both the moving and satashtusham, non-moving. Lokaya, for their residence. Patnim, wife. Asi, you are. Mataram, the mother. Pita, the father. Videma, do we offer. Cha, also. Asyai, unto the mother. Namasa, with all obeisances. Saha, along with. Tvaya, with you. Yasyam, in whom. Swatejasa, by your own potency. Agnim, fire. Eva, likened. Aranau, in the Arani wood. Adaha, invested. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. O Lord, for the residential purposes of all inhabitants, both moving and non-moving, this earth is your wife, and you are the Supreme Father. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you, along with Mother Earth, in whom you have invested your own potency, just as an expert sacrificer puts fire in the Arani wood. Purport. The so-called law of gravitation, which sustains the planets, is described herein as the potency of the Lord. This potency is invested by the Lord in the way that an expert sacrificial brahmana puts fire in the Arani wood by the potency of Vedic mantras. By this arrangement, the world becomes habitable for both the moving and non-moving creatures. The conditioned souls who are residents of the material world are put in the womb of Mother Earth in the same way the seed of a child is put by the father in the womb of the mother. This conception of the Lord and the earth as father and mother is explained in Bhagavad Gita 14:4. Conditioned souls are devoted to the motherland in which they take their birth, but they do not know their father. The mother is not independent in producing children. Similarly, material nature cannot produce living creatures unless in contact with the Supreme Father, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam teaches us to offer obeisances unto the Mother along with the Father, the Supreme Lord, because it is the Father only who impregnates the Mother with all energies for the sustenance and maintenance of all living beings, both moving and non-moving. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this example of the Arni wood being manipulated by a Brahmin invested with such potency that it can automatically produce fire, this analogy is used several other places in the Srimad Bhagavatam. For the example, there's the story of King Vena, who was a very demoniac king who was interfering with the worship with the citizens of his kingdom worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He was very cruel and selfish. And eventually the Brahmins removed him from his position, by the power of their mantras. But they began to churn his body, and from his body Maharaj Prithu, an incarnation of Krishna, arose along with his consort. I think her name was Archie. So in that part of the Bhagavatam, it's described that Maharaj Prithu was produced from the body of this King Vena by a process similar to that of getting fire out of the Arani wood. And it's also mentioned in connection with the story of Gajendra, the elephant. It was a personality who had taken birth as an elephant, and when he was bathing with his female elephants in a lake, a crocodile grabbed him by the leg and began to pull him into the waters. So he remembered in that dangerous situation, Gajendra, in the body of the elephant, remembered prayers he had offered to Krishna in a previous life as a human being. And in those prayers, he mentions that in this world, Krishna is covered to the eyes of the materialists by the material energy. Just like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Naham Prakasha Sarvasa Yogamaya Samavritaha. I'm not visible to the conditioned souls because I'm covered by my Yogamaya potency. So he said in the same way that fire is covered by the Arani wood, you are covered by your own potencies. So the devotees pray, like in the Ishopanishad, that Krishna remove that covering so he can be seen by the devotee. And this Arani wood also comes up in connection with the story of King Pururava and Urvashi. So Urvashi was an Apsara from Gandharva Loka, and she came to earth because she was attracted by King Pururava, who was very handsome and qualified and strong and powerful in many ways. And they remained together for some time, but then she departed, and he was broken-hearted. He just wandered all over the world searching for her to try to get back in a relationship with her. And he found her at Kurukshetra, and she said, okay, I'll be with you one night in a year. So that happened, but still he missed her. And she said, well, if you pray to the Gandharvas, maybe they can make some arrangement. So he prayed to the Gandharvas, but they gave him a girl called Agnishtali. And to him, she appeared just like Urvashi. So in the end, however, he detected it wasn't Urvashi. So at that point, the ages, the yuga shift. It shifted from one yuga to another. So now it became Treta Yuga. And in Treta Yuga, the practice of God realization is by yajna or sacrifice. Tretayam yajato makai, it said. In Treta Yuga, one should perform yajna or sacrifice. And he did that, but not with a proper motive to satisfy the Supreme Lord. He just wanted to continue his relationship of sense gratification with Urvashi. So it said that, he took 2 pieces of Arani wood, and he considered the top one to be himself and the lower one to be Urvashi. And in the middle was another piece of wood that was to be lit on fire by his manipulation of the Arani wood. And that he considered to be his son. So he did get a fire, and he did get the sun out of it, but wasn't the proper motive. But Srila Prabhupada mentioned that connection, that one can get a son or daughter by 3 methods: by ordinary conception, by initiation, or by yajna. So, and yajna, you need, at least in those days, you needed this Arani wood, which wasn't lit on fire with, a match or a, So, but by the power of the Brahman to invest the energy of fire within the wood so that it would come out. So that's one point about this Arani wood. Here it's stated in the verse, "We offer our respectful obeisances unto you, Varahadev, along with Mother Earth, in whom you've invested your own potency, just as an expert sacrificer puts fire in the Arani wood." So, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that this refers to a couple of things. One thing is he invests the potency to keep the earth plane, Bhumandala, above the surface of the Garbhodak ocean. Because we can ask, well, how are the different planetary systems maintaining their positions? How come they all haven't collapsed into the Garbhodak ocean, which occupies the bottom half of each universe? There's not just one universe. According to the Vedic cosmology, when Mahavishnu, lying on the causal ocean, breathes out, numberless, infinite number of universes come out. And when he breathes in, they enter back into his body. And during the time that they're manifest, life is manifested in the universe. But as we were learning in this chapter, when the devotees like Swayambhuva Manu and other Prajapatis, when they were given the task of populating the different planetary systems, including the Bhumandala system, Bhumandala was underwater. So therefore Krishna appeared as Varaha to bring that planetary system up out of the Garbhodak ocean. But how does it stay up? It's because Krishna has invested, in the form of Varahadev, invested his potency to keep it in its place. And that, Srila Prabhupada said, is what we call gravity. And gravity, understanding what gravity is still a conundrum, a problem for physicists. They have their different theoretical understandings, but nobody can say what it actually is. So, another way in which the Lord has invested his potencies in the Earth planetary system, Bhumandala, as it's described here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, is that he has injected by his glance the souls into the material energy. So that is and that's how living entities are produced. I mean, we see there are so many different forms of life. There are plants, animals, human beings, demigods even, and they appear to be taking birth by conception of the male and female. Of course, that's another big mystery for modern science. Where did that male and female thing come from? Because the first living entities, according to their theory, was, somehow or other in the Earth's early oceans, when there was no life at all anywhere, somehow or other the chemicals combined together to form some first single-celled creature which would reproduce just by splitting. How this idea of how this reality of male and female, combining to produce offspring different from themselves is something they say happened by evolution, but they really can't figure it out. I mean, the reason there's male and female in this level of reality is because on the highest level of reality, that is there. Radha, Krishna, Lakshmi Narayan, Sita Ram, and all of that. But as Srila Prabhupada is explaining here, in Bhagavad Gita, it acknowledges the seed-giving role of the father. Sarva Yona Shukantaya Murtiya Sambhavantaya Tasam Brahma Mahadyonir Aham Bija Parda Pitaha. You can look at all the different forms of life that conditioned souls appear in, but they're all a product of the seed of the spirit soul being injected by Krishna, the seed-giving father, into the womb of the material energy. And of course, he does that not directly, but by the agency of, it's explained, Shiva is the glance of Lord Vishnu by which he contacts the material energy indirectly, because the Vishnu forms don't directly contact the material energy. So in that sense, Krishna is the seed-giving father. And because those seeds are there, if the soul wasn't there, the body won't form. So the presence of the soul has to be there in order for the material body to form and develop and remain in an active condition. When, if the soul leaves the body at any point or doesn't enter the body at some point, the embryo won't develop, or the body of the creature, if it's living, won't continue to live. So the real life force is eternal. It's not from this level of reality. Mamaivam so jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, the soul is eternally my part and parcel. And the verse goes on to say, Manasashtan indriyani prakritishtani karshati. But now that eternal part of me is falsely identifying with the material mind and senses and is struggling very hard with them on the level of prakriti, the material energy. But that material energy, although the scientists may imagine that it's just some combinations of the material energy that form the living things, the living entities, it's not. Without the presence of the seed provided by the Supreme Father, Krishna, those living entities wouldn't be manifesting. And in the beginning, these life forms are manifested by the Prajapatis, and then once they're manifest, they go on to reproduce themselves, but only if Krishna provides the seed of the soul for them. So the material energy is considered to be like the mother. Krishna is like the seed-giving father. And in terms of ourselves, I mean, some of you have children, but without Krishna providing the soul, causing the soul to enter, there wouldn't be any children. So, just like, some years ago, scientists were trying to clone a sheep. They were trying to produce on their own, just by combining, different cells and manipulating them. They were trying to produce an exact copy of a parent sheep, a mother sheep, in an artificial way. So they took out the nucleus of the egg of the mother, and in a test tube they were manipulating it, and they kept trying and trying to do it hundreds of times. So I think Krishna was just looking at them, saying, okay, you're trying to do this one time, 100 times, wow, 200 times, 300 times, wow, you're pretty determined. So maybe at the 300th time, he allowed a soul to enter into the biological materials they were trying to emanate. They got their sheep. But only if Krishna allows a soul to enter and stay in an embryo will it come to term and actually become a living entity. But that isn't the ultimate goal, is to become a conditioned soul in the material world. It's to go back home, back to Godhead, get out of the cycle of birth and death, get out of contact with the material energy. So Srimad Bhagavatam is the guidebook for how to go about that process. And even liberation isn't the ultimate goal, because that just is a negation of material existence. It isn't positive spiritual existence. Jivara Sarupahoy Krishnera Nityadas. We're meant to be eternal servants of Krishna, and that's what will ultimately satisfy us. And what kind of servant we are, there are different kinds of eternal servants of Krishna. Some are, they look at Krishna as the eternal friend, eternal master, their eternal beloved child, their eternal beloved husband or lover. So that's what will ultimately satisfy us. And we've been given this opportunity to be existing in the human form of life in which it's possible to realize these things. So we shouldn't waste this opportunity, because the human form of life isn't guaranteed. You know, if we don't use it properly, then it's possible to descend into lower species. So Varahadev, he is invested this world with its potency to remain out of the waters of devastation, and he's representing the seed-giving Father who has given us this opportunity, so we shouldn't waste it. Okay. Yes, Spavas?
So the soul goes into a particular body. What is the image of a soul that goes into a dog body or a sheep body, or let's say a human being? Like if a human being, we have like 2 arms, 2 legs.
Yes.
Is that what the soul's form is?
Srila Prabhupada says sometimes that the body is based on the condition of the soul, but actually there's more than just the soul and the gross physical body. There's the soul and the subtle material body, which determines the form of the gross physical body. And actually, we're not the subtle material body or the gross physical body. We are the spirit soul, Asangamaya Purusha. The soul itself has no direct connection with those subtle and gross material bodies. It's only by false ego, by false identification, that we identify with those things. And that false ego is very strong. And the reason why it is so strong like that is that the original spiritual form of the soul, the Svarupa, can only be used for one thing: loving devotional service to Krishna. That's all it does. And in the spiritual world, that's the only thing that goes on. So if a soul, Krishna Bahir Mukahana Bhogavanchakare, if a soul decides to turn from Krishna and become an independent enjoyer, then it can't be in the spiritual world, and it can't be using its spiritual body. It has to be another place, another location, just like in this verse and purport it's stated that by his potency, Krishna is giving different lokas, different locations for conditioned souls. And in that material world, they identify with a material body. And the example is given like in a dream. We may dream we're in a different kind of body, in a different place. So we're now in that condition. And as long as we're here, we have a subtle material body, which is made of mind, intelligence, false ego, and also, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, subtle senses. And they're knowledge-acquiring senses and working senses, arms, legs, so on and so forth. So, by Krishna's arrangement, we're not eternally in one kind of material body. Krishna, for our education, has made each body temporary. But as long as one is in the material world, one keeps the same subtle body, subtle material body. And according to the state of one's consciousness at the time of death, the subtle material body is configured in a certain way. And according to the way it's configured, you get another material body. So until one becomes freed from the subtle material body, one takes one form after another. And Krishna has made 8,400,000 different kinds of bodies because he's anticipated the kinds of desires that a conditioned soul might have. And just like in an automobile manufacturer will understand, well, people desire these different kinds of vehicles, so he provides different kinds of vehicles, trucks, sports cars, all different varieties, because he knows this is what people want, this is what they can get according to their taste, their desire, their income. So the goat body is provided by Krishna, the centipede body is provided by Krishna because he anticipates those are the kinds of experiences and sense gratification that conditioned souls desire and deserve. Archita.
Good question, Subhash Prabhu. If I understand it correctly, he's asking whether the soul that's inside a dog's body looks like a dog, or the soul inside a cow's body looks like a cow. It's not necessarily so. Otherwise, if you always had the same material form that you have in the spiritual world, then you wouldn't change here. See? Let's say you're a cow in the spiritual world eternally and you fall to the material world, then every birth you would look like a cow, which is not the case. Because like you said, we have 8,400,000 forms that we can inhabit. We have one concrete example that I can think of in this Bhaktivinoda Thakur reveals in his Navadvita Mahatmya that in the spiritual world, he's a Manjari, he's a female form. But in that particular lifetime as Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was very much a male. Wife and 11 children, So the form that you have eternally in the spiritual world is not necessarily the form that you exhibit in every birth in the material world. So you may be eternally a cow in the spiritual world, but it's not that every time you take birth in the material world, you're going to be a cow. Obviously not. As you said, based on your consciousness, you're going to get a particular material body. And when you fall to the animal form, it's automatic. You go gradually from jalaja, from birth in the water, to higher bird, and beast, and then finally human being, and even beyond human being to demigod. So the external form changes. It's not necessarily based on the eternal form of the soul that's in that particular material body.
Yes. Yes. Can she have the microphone?
Hare Krishna. Thank you for a wonderful class, Prabhu. My question had to do with yagya. I know in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, they distinguish 2 types of yagyas. There's Jnanamaya yagya, and I forget the Sanskrit, starts with a D, but something like Druvamaya yagya, or do you know this?
Yes.
Okay, so of the 2, Jnanamaya yagya is ultimately sacrificing knowledge. It's the highest of the 2. Are these distinctions here only in Kali Yuga or also in Satya and Treta Yuga?
Well, in the purports to the story of King Pururava, Srila Prabhupada was making the distinction that he could have performed the sacrifice for the pleasure of Krishna. And this was in Treta Yuga, because the age had shifted, I think, from Satya Yuga to Treta Yuga. And therefore, Pururava started performing this sacrifice, but he was doing it with the motive of personal sense gratification, which is another level of yagya, just doing it for elevation to the heavenly planets or powers and abilities of a material kind. So I think that distinction was there in Treta Yuga when Pururava was performing his sacrifice to get back with Urvashi. So, and as I said, Srila Prabhupada mentioned it directly there, that this was karma kandiya, not jnana kandiya or for bhakti purposes. So it appears those kinds of distinctions were there in previous yugas as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki. Oops.